podcast. My name is Naz. This is an exciting week because right now, this weekend, we're going to find out who the baddest man on the planet is. When Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier come together and we figure out who the greatest heavyweight of all time is. The implications on this fight are enormous. In my opinion, right now, Stipe Miocic has cemented himself as the greatest heavyweight of all time because of the people that he's beaten. There has been many people that have come to take Stipe's throne. And Stipe was not just able to beat them with brute strength or heart and determination. It was due to the tactics that he's used for each fight that he's had. Daniel Cormier, being one of the ultimate competitors in MMA, period, has also cemented himself up there with the greats. With his amazing and illustrious Olympic career, and then starting his MMA career in the heavyweight division, and then later on moving to the lightweight division due to his relationship with Cain Velasquez. The amount of fights that these guys have won and in dominating fashion is mind-boggling. If you stop to think about it and you really truly think of the resume that these two gentlemen have, you can honestly find out why the UFC is billing this as the greatest heavyweight of all time. Think of all the organizations that have come out. The whole roster of heavyweight fighters that they've had. There are none that have come as close to Stipe and DC. Now, there are a lot of people that are talking about Daniel Cormier's career, which was mostly fought at the lightweight division. But the way that he was able to beat Stipe Miocic put him up there in the heavyweight greats because of how high level Miocic is. I think that's the reason why, myself included, believe what the UFC is telling us here, that this is for the greatest heavyweight of all time. Both of these men are tacticians in their own specialties. Stipe being the person that's able to maneuver around the ring and box people up. And DC using his phenomenal wrestling and tying people up and then grabbing them and sometimes even throwing them on the ground. DC, with his wrestling, is able to dictate the fights if he wants it on the ground or if he wants it on the feet. And that puts a lot of pressure on the opponent that he's fighting. And the reason for that is they're always worried about what DC is going to do. Is he going to bring it to the ground? Is he going to keep it on the feet? It's whatever DC wants. This fight is incredible, but this whole UFC 252 is a great card in itself. And in this podcast, I want to go over the whole card because especially in this time when the coronavirus is affecting all sports and was affecting MMA, it is great to see MMA bounce back. And the way that you can tell that they're bouncing back is that they're throwing a pay-per-view of this magnitude on at this time. We've seen some great fights in this, I'm going to call it COVID era of MMA. But to have this fight for the greatest heavyweight of all time during the COVID time shows how much in control the UFC has during this weird time for all sports and everybody in general. So now let's start off the card with kind of a weird point. The early prelims. Just to put it into perspective, on UFC.com, none of these fighters have pictures. So I'm going to watch it and see some great up-and-coming fighters. And then we move on to the prelims. This is where everything gets super interesting. We see Ashley Yoder, just to give you some highlights, we see Ashley Yoder on this card, on the prelims. That's going to be a great fight. She always comes to fight. And then we see Felice on this fight as a second main event in the preliminary card. And then we see a really great fight here with Jim Miller putting on this amazing performance during this time of his career. And let's see what he can do. And it's great because honestly, after this fight that Jim Miller has, if he wins, then we have to put him against someone that is a real contender. Because now he's on a roll. Jim Miller is on a complete roll right now. And I know that some of his fights have been they've been for the fans. Let's just be honest. And it all started with the Clay Guida fight on August 3rd of 2019. And then he fought Holtzman, which was a great fight. He fought Roberts, which is an equally great fight. And the reason why I'm saying that these fights are all great is because we're seeing Jim Miller defy time and show that he's still got it. So I'm really excited for this fight. But the thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about the most was there was a fight that was taken off the UFC main event. Now, by all accounts, and what I was reading online, and what I thought myself, I thought that Jim Miller would take the spot in the main event, starting off the pay-per-view portion. But the interesting thing is that Jim Miller is not there. The opening fight in the main event actually got replaced by Herbert Burns, Gilbert Burns' brother. I thought that was kind of weird, but I see a reasoning behind it. Now, this is just something that I'm seeing on my own after reviewing UFC.com. So I haven't heard what the rest of the media thinks about this. But in my opinion, the reason why I believe that there's a couple reasons this might have happened. Jim Miller might have just said, hey, I want to leave early. I don't want to stay one fight extra. The other thing is that since that is the free cable version of the fight, which Jim Miller is currently on, him and the UFC probably thought that Jim Miller could get more eyeballs to the early prelims, which is great in general. And I think that's the reasoning behind that, because they knew that Jim Miller could bring in more people. And that's what they really need to do to get more people to get that last minute pay-per-view buy. So that's why I think that this weird thing is happening. No disrespect to Herbert Burns, but Jim Miller, I believe, deserves to be on the pay-per-view portion of the card. But I believe that there's a true reasoning behind it. So after the Herbert Burns fight, we see that John Dodson is on the fight. That's going to be a great fight into itself. I've seen some people say that the fight between John Dodson and Merab is going to be a fight that's going to be almost in fast forward. These guys have a battery pack. They're going to be going at it the whole time. And it's going to look like I just said, the fight's in fast forward. Now, the next fight I really want to go in depth in. It's the Junior Dos Santos fight with Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, Jairzinho Rozenstruik is a super interesting fighter. I know that there's a lot of hype behind him. He's a decorated kickboxer. But do we really know what he is capable of? We know that he's got devastating power. He ripped off Alistair Overeem's lip in the 5th round, which was almost a Hail Mary throw. But the reason behind it, the reason why I say this, do we really know what Rozenstruik is all about, is because he is so capable of knocking people out quickly. Because he's got that fight-ending capability in his hands. Almost like Derek Lewis. And we just recently saw that in Derek Lewis, where Derek Lewis was almost taking a beating, was taken to the ground, but he was so confident in his power that he knew not to be worried about those situations, because he knows he has that fight-ending power. Now, Derek Lewis, we've seen him in tough situations. We've seen him in situations where he's come back to win fights, just like the fight that we just saw. But Rozenstruik, we've seen him just knock people out, flatline people. Like the fight with Orlovsky. Knocked him out in the 1st round. And then the next fight right after that, he's fighting Alistair Overeem. He was getting pieced up. But he threw this flurry of attacks. It was a left-right combination. He was just throwing everything that he's got. His coaches and himself must have known that he was losing that fight. So he threw everything that he got and knocked out Alistair Overeem. Well, yeah, actually almost ripped off his lip. And did he really knock him out? I know Alistair Overeem was on the ground and everything. And I know his lip was torn up. But it seemed like Rozenstruik just pulled that out of nowhere. Now, maybe he's going to be the Derek Lewis, version 1. Because I don't think anybody can do it better than Derek Lewis. I've never seen it before in my life where a fighter's so confident in his power. But maybe Biggie Boy can be something like that. But we just don't know. We just don't know yet. Because the fight right after the Overeem fight was the Francis Ngannou fight. And that was about 2 months ago, where he got viciously knocked out by Francis Ngannou. And just to go on a sidetrack right here, Francis Ngannou, after not pulling the trigger in that Derek Lewis fight, has probably read all the comments, read all of the news reports about this, and now he's just throwing bombs at everybody. And that's what Biggie Boy saw around 2 months ago. Let me say it again for you, if you don't understand what I mean. But 2 months ago, he got hit by Francis Ngannou, who has been recorded to have the same power in his uppercut as Fiat 500, I believe. This guy got hit by a car 2 months ago, and now he's coming back to fight JDS, who on Instagram is looking like a killer. A heavyweight with a six-pack. He's looking crazy ripped right now. And with the boxing ability that he has and the black belt in jiu-jitsu, he has a sophistication to his fighting style that I just don't know if Biggie Boy has. He also fought Derek Lewis. He won that in the second round. But then he got beat by Francis Ngannou. KO first round. And then he got beat by Curtis Blades. So there's three things now that I've talked about that are actually a good thing for JDS. And now you're like, what are these three things? I only named two. It was the boxing and the jiu-jitsu. But if he loses this fight to Biggie Boy, he'll be on a 3-fight skid. The UFC really doesn't like that. And I don't think they would do this to JDS. But with the average fighter, when they're on a 3-fight skid like that, it's about time that they're going to get a phone call from the UFC that they're going to get cut. But the heavyweight division is a little bit light at the moment. So I don't think that would happen to Junior Dos Santos. But that's in the back of his head, that this is a possibility. So he's going to come out with his technical boxing and maybe even show off his jiu-jitsu. And he's going to come out with a game plan that is going to give Biggie Boy some problems. Now, the thing about having amazing power like Biggie Boy has, it means that you're a threat at all times. There's not going to be a second in this fight that we're not going to think that Rozenstruik is going to knock him out. Dos Santos could be destroying him the whole fight, but he has that power, and I'm talking about Biggie Boy here, where in a moment's notice or in one instance, the lights could turn off for JDS. So you probably can tell in my voice that I'm really excited for this fight. Is it going to be the knockout power that we've seen from Biggie Boy that turns the lights off on JDS? Or will it be the technical abilities in Junior Dos Santos boxing, jiu-jitsu, and knowing that he doesn't want to be on a 3-fight skid. So there's a lot of possibilities over here. And like I said, really excited about this fight. And it's got a lot of implications in the heavyweight division, which is great to see. Now, the next fight on the card is in the bantamweight division. And it seems like by reading online, watching social media, that Sean O'Malley is one of the stars in the UFC, and he's about to break that barrier to make him into a mega star. But he's got a guy in front of him who is tested, has the chin, has the power in Marlon Vera. Now, just to talk about Marlon Vera, he is an aggressive fighter. You can hear it in his voice when he talks, cussing and swearing in every single interview he gets. And on top of that, he feels like he's being slighted at the moment because this young kid is coming out of nowhere and disrespecting him. He's tested in the ways that we've seen him in every aspect in MMA so far. We know that he's got hands. We know that he can throw kicks. We know that he can submit people. But will his aggression be something like a downfall for Sean O'Malley? We don't have the same information on Sean O'Malley as we do for Chito because of how young he is. But we do know this, that he's got power in his hands. And he is massive for the bantamweight division, which he is in. He's around 5'11" or 6 foot. And he's cutting down to 135. Which is a feat unto itself. But the technical ability and the fluidity that he shows in his striking is amazing. The way that he's able to think and react to fighters is a great and amazing test that he has passed with flying colors. But the one thing that we haven't seen in MMA is his jiu-jitsu. But we've seen his jiu-jitsu outside of MMA in gi competitions. While he was on suspension, Sean O'Malley was playing with high-level grapplers in gi competitions. So we've seen that he's high level. So we know that he's got jiu-jitsu. But what happens when it's mixed with MMA? It's a totally different game when someone's throwing punches at you in your guard. But we do know this about Sean O'Malley. He is scary creative in the cage. He turns into Picasso when that cage door opens. He throws spinning back kicks that lead it into punches. And for his wiry frame, he's got power. He's able to extend on people and catch them at distance with his length. Think about it. You got a 6-foot guy punching you from distance. And now throw on top of that this guy's flexibility allows him to throw kicks from an even greater distance. Now, will Marlon be the person who just flies into Sugar's range and gets knocked out? We've seen that in the past fight that Sean O'Malley's had. Sean O'Malley was fighting Weiland. Weiland has this really weird style. Joe Rogan said this in the commentary that he was doing. That mixed with his mustache, he looks like a guy fighting from the olden times. If you saw a silhouette of Weiland, you would see his hands are real low. He has this kind of shake, and he just plots his feet on the ground. Flat-footed, if you will. Eddie Weiland's no joke. And he came to scrap in that fight. And he was just pushing forward and forward and forward and forward. And he thought that he could take Sean O'Malley's shot. And when he hit him with that punch, it was crisp and clean. Because Sean O'Malley faked the uppercut. Weiland went for the defense on the uppercut. And then Sean hit him with this Mack truck. And knocked him out. Weiland didn't even know where he was when he was on the ground. That's crazy to see. It doesn't make any sense that a guy this wiry is able to produce this kind of power. But let's think about it. Let's think about who some other fighters that have range and power like that. Now, John Jones is not known for his knockout abilities, but he still has some amazing power. And he's super wiry. Someone like Sean O'Malley. Conor McGregor at 145, he was knocking dudes out. It was like when Conor hit people with his left hand, people would just they wouldn't know what hit him. And that's what I see when people take shots from Sean O'Malley. Now, let's get away from all of the technical abilities and all that kind of stuff. Because, like I said, starting off talking about the fight between Sean O'Malley and Marlon, that Sean O'Malley, if he wins this fight, he'll blow the roof off. We got a superstar. Because he's winning in a fashion that it's appealing to everybody. He's just knocking people out and walking away. Mark Hunt style. He knows when he touches you, he just walks away. No expression on his face. He knows he has the power. That's a really dangerous fighter. When he knows he possesses that kind of ability and then uses it on you. Sean O'Malley appeals to so many different generations. He appeals to the younger crowd. He's starting to appeal to an older demographic as well because he's winning fights. DC talked about this when they both chatted with Megan O'Leary. That Sean O'Malley's doing everything great. He's got the clothing line. He's got the podcast that he's doing. He does the little videos online. But at the end of the day, people like that he's winning. And that's the one thing that's going to shoot him to the moon. Conor McGregor, when he was going on his run, what really shot him to the top was the fact that he was winning all of his fights in devastating fashion. And he was talking and he was backing it up. The one thing that the fans hate is people that talk a lot and don't back it up. Sean O'Malley has this kind of reserved style to him where he does talk a lot. He's confident and he backs it up. That's what the fans are really loving about him. The possibilities if Sean O'Malley wins this fight are ginormous. Some people are even calling for a title fight after that. I don't think that's the correct move. I think for the public to get the most amount of views, I think he needs to get another fight that is a step up in competition. Wait for the Cody Garbrandt fight with Figueiredo. See what the outcome of that is. Sean O'Malley's talked about this, which I really like about him. He wants to wait for Cody Garbrandt, see the outcome, and if Cody wins, then he'll fight him. But that's a lot of factors. Both of those guys got to win all their fights. That's a lot to say. You know, we can talk about it all we want, but these boys still got to win. It all comes back to winning. But Sean O'Malley is a super smart guy. Because a lot of fighters, they go and do commercials, they go and do movies, they try getting famous. But what Sean O'Malley has done by creating his podcast, by creating his clothing line, and by creating his video series and vlogs and whatnot, he's become his own boss. Nobody can tell him, hey, I need you on Twitch today. Hey, you need to make a vlog today. You need to make a podcast. If he wants to take a break, he can tell himself that. But a lot of other fighters, they go and become movie stars and commercial actors and all this kind of stuff, but they're beholden to all of their bosses. Sean O'Malley is still getting the same amount of fan attention, but he is his own boss. He bought a cage off of eBay and then is fighting in that. He is his own boss. He tells himself when I need to go to the gym, when I need to record a podcast, and when I need to go on Twitch. And he's still getting all of the same benefits that everybody else is getting. Super smart move. And a great way to secure your future. Now here we go. Here's the main event. We got Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier. Both of them have decorated careers. Both of them have won fights against each other. Both of them have lost fights against each other. They've had ups and downs in their careers. And this is the culmination of all of that hard work. Starting off with Stipe. He was defending the belt for a very long time. And then the one fight where I saw that he showed me his championship mentality when a man named Francis Ngannou was on a roll, knocking people out. Stipe Miocic and his amazing team, who is truly underrated. The whole team out there in Cleveland, truly underrated. Due to the fact that they're able to game plan for all of these fighters. They saw Francis Ngannou. They knew that Francis was an amazing and powerful striker. But he would gas. That's what happened in that fight. Stipe Miocic won. He beat like a monster almost in Francis Ngannou. Then on July 7th, 2018, wow, in 2018, that's how long this thing's been going. That's crazy to think. But in 2018, Stipe fought DC. Hard-fought fight. Crazy fight. And it was the first time that a lightweight champion was facing the current heavyweight champion. And we didn't know at the time the power that DC had in his hands. His coaches, everybody was saying that with the added weight that he has, he's more happy. He's knocking people out in the gym. Myself included, we were like, wow, DC knocking people out at heavyweight? Is this even possible? You're telling me that a guy that is the same height as Sean O'Malley, about 5'11", is knocking people out at heavyweight? I thought it was impossible. But then we saw it. And now there was some controversy to this fight as well. There was eye poke in there. And a lot of Stipe supporters are saying that due to that eye poke, DC won the fight. But DC, like I said at the beginning of this fight, is always looking for those grappling exchanges with his decorated wrestling ability. So he keeps his fingers out, fully extended. He's trying to grab at Stipe because that's how he knows he knows that that's one of the only ways that he can win this fight, is to get in real close to Stipe Miocic. Now, what ended up happening was it was a clinch and DC knocked him out. And both DC and Daniel were talking about the fact that it was really easy. It was like Rock'em Sock'em Robots at one point. But DC, with his game plan and his added confidence, and I think this might be due to the fact that he knew that he was out of the John Jones period of his life, knocked out Stipe Miocic. So then after that fight, we got the whole Brock Lesnar fiasco. Everybody thought that DC was going to fight Brock Lesnar. There was a whole issue with that. And that caused the next fight to be in 2019. Which was super weird because Stipe, also at the time, was regarded as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. So people thought it was weird that how come he didn't get a rematch right away. It was due to the fact that Brock Lesnar was involved. DC, being the massive WWE fan that he is, always wanted to fight Brock. And they had a whole skirmish after the first Stipe and DC fight. So in 2019 on August 17th, these two met again. DC being super confident, having the belt, knowing that he can knock out Stipe Miocic, having that ability, they fought. Now, DC said this. He said that I thought it was going to be a simple fight. I was hitting him. And Miocic, he easily bleeds. So DC was getting more and more confidence as the fight went on, because he was catching him every single time. He kept on catching him, But Stipe came out in the second round, I believe, and started hitting these body punches on DC. Just cashing those checks in, knowing that they would help him in the later rounds, which they did. In the fourth round, it was a KO, TKO stoppage. It shows the mental fortitude that Stipe has. It shows the ability that his, like I said previously, the underrated corner, the smart, amazing corner that Stipe has, to notice this about DC and for Stipe Miocic to implement it. There's one thing about DC that we all know, that his coaches can be yelling out something to DC, and man, it's a 50-50 chance if DC is going to listen. Javier Mendez talked about this. He says that he has this issue with a lot of his fighters, Khabib Nurmagomedov included. But this fight is great because we know that there have already been two ways of winning. There have already been two ways of winning this fight already done. If you think that DC hasn't taken into account Stipe hitting him in the body, then you're crazy. We just watched the press conference. And in the press conference, DC was even making a joke about it. It's like, of course he's going to hit me in the body, but he's going to figure out that I and my team have taken this into account. Now, Stipe knows that DC is going to extend his fingers out and try grabbing him and try causing the same knockout that he had. But he's a smart guy. His team is full of smart people. And they've taken that into account. So now, what is the way that they're going to figure out to finish this fight? And that's why this fight is so interesting. And then you take all of these things and you add this major or minor factor in some people's eyes, the cage being a little bit smaller. The cage being a little bit smaller, a lot of people are saying it's DC's, it's a good thing for DC. But is that really? Stipe Miocic, being the height of 6'5", is like amazing in his mobility. He's able to move around the ring. He has amazing ring generalship, evading shots, evading takedowns, using his wrestling, which not a lot of people talk about, but using his wrestling defense to keep the fight on the feet because he has that boxing ability. Now, Stipe also in this press conference didn't think that the cage was a major issue for him. And I think a lot of people are forgetting about this. But in the majority of the gyms in North America, I know this, they're the same size as the Contender Series octagon. A lot of these fighters fight in this ring. It's only the super high level. Maybe AKA has a large ring, but even they have multiple rings, and some of them are smaller. Some octagons are larger. So all of these fighters, they know how to deal with this smaller cage. I don't think people should be talking about this as much as they are. Because 9 times out of 10, these guys have the exact same cage in their gym. They've all fought in it. So I don't think Stipe is going to have a major disadvantage to this because he's trained for it. I don't think Daniel Cormier is going to get a major advantage for it. But I don't think it's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. This is going to be the fight. Now, I'm about to say it again. The fight that solidifies who the greatest heavyweight of all time is. And this is one of those times where the UFC has promoted something. We've all sat down. We've all thought, hey, are they really trying to convince me of this? Is this true? And I'm telling you that this is the truth. This is for the greatest heavyweight of all time. In both regards. If Stipe wins, he's going to be considered the greatest heavyweight of all time. If Daniel Cormier wins, he'll be considered the greatest heavyweight of all time. Now, the one differentiating fact about both of them is if Daniel Cormier wins, I believe he will move up in the tiers of greatest of all time in all weight divisions because of his run at light heavyweight and because of his heavyweight career thus far. Stipe, and this might be just due to the fact of the people that he's fought, if he wins this fight, he'll be the greatest heavyweight of all time. But will he be up there in the tier number 1 of greatest fighters of all time? I don't think so. And this is just due to the fact of the people that he's fought in the heavyweight division so far. And this is not, I'm not trying to make a slight on Stipe Miocic. And this, I'm gonna be honest with you, and I don't think a lot of people in the podcast space are. We're really driven because we're really driven in the fact that we really like a person that can talk. Stipe Miocic, he's he doesn't talk a lot on social media. He might plug whatever brand he's trying to plug on social media. He might show a picture of his kids, but he's not one to talk a lot of smack about his opponents. We saw this in the press conference. They were having arguments on who should answer the question first. And I don't think a lot of people bring this up on it being a major factor on why some people are better than others. And reality is that this is one of the reasons why we believe some people are better than others. Look at Daniel Cormier. He's amazing on the mic. Has people called out. He tells younger UFC fighters, don't let the UFC give you your next fight. You got to call the person out. You think you're doing a favor to the UFC when you say, oh, I'll just do whatever the UFC tells me to do. The UFC doesn't like that. Nobody likes that. It's not going to help you. Because the UFC doesn't care. They want stars that call people out. Now, if you're in this sport just to get a paycheck and leave, I don't think this is the right sport for you. You should be wanting that belt. And the fastest way to get that belt is to call people out. And that's what DC did his whole career. More on the latter part of his career. But he's amazing on the mic. One of the best. And this might be also due to the fact of his love of WWE. He talks about it all the time. But Stipe just doesn't have that flair on the mic. He shows it in the cage. But at the end of the day, like I've said so many times in this podcast now, this is for the greatest heavyweight of all time. Above even Fedor, I believe. I know this fight is going to be full of fireworks. We're going to see a lot of technical knowledge from some of the smartest fighters out there. Two of the smartest right here that have amazing game plans and always come to fight. Lastly, do I think that this is Daniel Cormier's last fight? Yes. I believe this is Daniel Cormier's last fight. Unless, and there's two factors here, he wins and John Jones comes to the heavyweight division. This is going to eat at Daniel Cormier for the rest of his life. And if you think he can just sit down and play golf and watch John Jones dominate everybody, you're out of your mind. Now, I've said in the past now that I believe Stipe would retire after this fight as well. Now, I'm going to admit to you, I believe that I was wrong. Because now hearing Stipe talk, and this is the problem as well, is that we don't see him in the media as much as DC. But seeing Stipe talk now, it seems like he's here to stay. Win or loss. And the factor and the reason for that is because he's in a win-win situation right here. He loses to Daniel Cormier, he fights Francis Ngannou for the belt. He wins, he fights Francis Ngannou again. He's in a win-win situation. So, but aside from that, it's great that Daniel Cormier is going to be able to spend more time with his family, more time with his loved ones and friends. And he said it himself, and I think it was the best way to describe it. You know, unless George St. Pierre comes back, George St. Pierre left with a belt. And that's what Daniel Cormier has the opportunity to do. And Stipe Miocic has the opportunity to cement himself and shut down all the doubters and tell everybody that he is the greatest heavyweight of all time. I'm so excited for this whole card. I'm going to watch it top to bottom. It's a great time to be an MMA fan. And I can't wait to share my thoughts with you guys. It's really amazing to express myself over a podcast and talk to you guys about all these fights, because it helps me understand as an MMA fan as well. Because when I verbally talk about these fights, it helps me understand all of the fights as well. So I'm really grateful. I really appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. And thank you for the support. And I'll talk to you guys soon. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. Bye.